I have a surprise for you. How you think the economy works doesn't work that way. If you're actually still using supply and demand and those kind of forces to look at the economy, you're using the wrong algorithm. What you need to be looking at is irrationality and behaviors. This is the most common type of behavior inside of our economy. The way I kind of relate to it is that me and my wife actually have a snack shop on Fridays after school for all our elementary kids there. And the interesting thing is that these kids will go out of their way to get their 50-cent pieces or their $2 bills that they're supposed to be collectible and spend them at the snack shop. And the parents over and over and over said, man, I don't get it. They want to spend their own money on this. We have the same snacks at home. Well, that's an irrational thing, right? That's a behavioral thing. We've created this excitement because it's at school. They could shop in front of their friends. They could buy their friends stuff. So that's kind of cool. And at the end of the day, this is a good resource for the school because they could go back and buy picnic benches or anything like that through the money that we've earned for them. So it is important as humans that we could better understand our place in the economy if we understand a little bit more about behavioral economics. So let's break this down into a few questions here. What is behavioral economics? How decisions are irrational? And why is it important to understand behavioral economics? So let's start with what is behavioral economics, the what. Let's kind of define it, right? So it's that whole irrationality. It's that whole, I want to do this because I feel like it's right, okay? And this concept was really introduced to me by Dan Ariely with Predictably Irrational, the hidden forces that shape our decisions. And Mr. Ariely here is a professor at Duke University. And he also does research on behavioral economics. So he's the guy every day that's thinking about this. And this book is just chock full of his research. Originally, what happened was my boss bought this book for me. And why I think that's important is because he's trying to get me to understand that people act irrationally, right? Especially when they're making big purchasing decisions. We make purchasing decisions all the time. Network gear, desktops, laptops, iPads, those kind of things like that. So what does vendor loyalty give me? What does stuff like brand loyalty give me, right? Why do I buy the same thing of equipment every single time? Does it really matter? Those are the things that we really need to kind of settle out with our economy. And so this was kind of had big impacts of my own on my career, right? So, but let's look at those decisions real quick and see how they're actually irrational. Dan Ariely also has a whole bunch of different research models in there and different scenarios, but some of the ones that really stuck out to me are some of the ones that he speaks about regularly. And one of those is that he did one on attractiveness, right? So if we have this graphic here, we see that there's a picture of a person and that same person but a little bit deformed and a whole other person, right? And the test was to say, look at this lineup, which one do you think is more attractive? Because there's a worse option of one, the other one actually pops out to be more attractive. So the one that there's not a disfigurement of, right? Not another picture of a disfigurement. We always pick that one, right? It was shocking to see the numbers on that as far as how many people would pick that over anything else. And you got to think, do we actually see this as attractive, right? Or do we not? And so if we look at that, there's another study that kind of really was set apart as well. And what he did was he studied why some countries had high organ donor rates and for volunteers as far as that goes, and some did not. And what he found was really interesting. Came down to the form at the DMV where you sign up for if you want to be an organ donor or not. Having an opt-in system was way more efficient as far as getting more people on. Having an opt-out system was way more efficient to get people on the system than an opt-in system. These countries that didn't have a lot of organ donors literally did not have a form that worked for people people's behavior. So the basic thing is that decisions are very complex. And that's what Dan says all the time, is that they're very complex. And so if we don't understand something, it's hard for us to make a decision. So we just try to make the best decision we can right there with information that we have, right? So, but this is why it's good to understand behavioral economics, right? And so what I wanted to do is kind of get off of this book and see if anybody else is doing any kind of research into this area. And what I've seen is people are, right? So let me share a few articles with you and just a few numbers, and we'll get through this part pretty quick, I think. Leveraging behavioral economics to improve educational performance. This is an article by the NBER Digest, right? And what's interesting about the study is they found that students would perform better when they're rewarded. We all know this, okay? But they would perform better when there was associated loss with their reward too. So it's like gambling, right? You put money in the slot machine and you keep gambling, and hopefully you get a little bit more and you get a little bit less, but you still have a pile of money to look after. And that's the whole thing that they were saying, is that like if they rewarded with cookies, you know, if they had a pile of cookies in front of them and they took one away each time they got a question wrong, they were more apt to actually try to get the test right. So I think that was really interesting, and that could really relate to real life as far as trying to incentivize people. So the next one is the role of behavioral economics and behavioral decision making in America's retirement savings decisions. This was in the Social Security Bulletin, volume 70. And this found that people made some of the same behavioral decisions in retirement savings, which is really shocking because you think that'd be a very solid place that people try to make rational decisions. But procrastination and no self-discipline led people to not save money. 82% of respondents to a survey they did reported that they would like to save money and build personal wealth. Yet 60% of those same people said that I don't think I'm saving enough for the future. So it's kind of, you know, counterintuitive there, right? Some other interesting parts of this is that we can apply this to other parts of our life, right? So this article, Safety and Behavioral Economics, Making Choices and Decisions in the Workplace, actually it was posted in the Alaska Business Monthly. And the article talks about how they're relating those behavioral economic issues to safety in the workplace. So they're saying like social norms, right? People don't do this for safety, right? They don't, tether off when they're in high places. Well, that's a social norm. We could break that social norm with other things besides just punishment. What if we did a reward system and we just took away bits of the reward system every time the system was broken? Those kind of things like that we can apply to real life, right? And what I thought was the most interesting to kind of prove my point here was an article, Following the Heart, Not the Head, really kind of dived into how we find our soulmate. Well, what it basically found is that it's more than just love that we put into this. It's these irrational, different things that we look for in a partner. So I think that really through kind of describing what behavioral economics is and describing how decisions can be irrational and discovering why it's important to understand behavioral economics, we'd really see that we could better understand our place in our economy if we understand behavioral economics. So I hope I really didn't scare you all about the future. Behavioral economics has been here, it's going to be here, and that's just something we're going to have to live with. And I think that it's better to live with something that you understand than something you don't. So next time you make a purchase or something like that, just think just a little bit. Are you making an irrational decision?